Good morning or afternoon as people are filtering in. We will get started soonish. Hey, Kim, good to see you in there. Let me do some logistics while we're waiting for folks to filter in. Gonna have the chat on, obviously, so you can chat with anyone in the webinar, us or other folks. Just make sure in Zoom sometimes it defaults to just messaging hosts and panelists, which is not great for actually talking to other people. Um, so logistics wise, you can ask questions there. Also, these webinars are often quite small. So if you would rather come on voice and ask questions or talk about things, you can. My guess is we're going to have probably around 10 people, maybe a few less in the actual webinar, given how many people register for a webinar versus how many people are just like, send me the recording. So don't worry about taking up too much time. Get your questions in, and we'll handle those in the chat. Also, on a logistics note, we are recording these. This will go back up on the website. And then we are also starting a new center of the new area of the Help Center where we will have these sort of stored as fun ideas to use with Harmonize or fun ideas for coaching or those types of things. So I don't recognize everyone who's in the webinar, so I'll do introductions here shortly, but do know that if you are not a Harmonize customer, that's totally fine. You will still learn things. We will cover some of the more Harmonize specific stuff towards the end, because this is stuff that you can accomplish with your students. It's more painful, it's more tedious to accomplish it with your students without Harmonize. But we try to keep these webinars more broadly centered around like, what are we after? What are we trying to accomplish in this particular one? What can AI do? And how do you accomplish that with your students? And then we, of course, will do demos with Harmonize because I think the majority of the people here are Harmonize customers. And then at the end, we will get into the stuff you won't care about if you're not a Harmonize customer about how to set these things up and how to actually do it. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's get into introductions for those that don't know us. My name is Marcus. I'm one of the owners of Harmonize, and I have with me Alex, who is our instructional designer, and has been digging into a lot of the research of why you should care about this particular topic, and also has been pulling together some ideas of how to use AI coaching in your classroom. So anything I missed, Alex, that we need to dive in on logistics-wise?
No.
All right.
I think that's it.
Okay, so quick agenda for you of how we're going to run through this. I'm going to do a quick demo of what AI coaching using an instructor's rubric looks like. I'm obviously going to do that in Harmonize because it's way simpler. The same thing can be accomplished in ChatGPT or Gemini or the other things. You know, if you tell your students like, well, you'll see when I give the demo, we can talk through what that looks like outside of Harmonize. But then we will, once you've seen what it is, and we've talked through some of the goals of what we were trying to accomplish, I'm then going to turn it over to Alex to dig a little bit into some of the research of why, and some of the ideas of how to use this. And then we will come back in towards the end and talk about how to get this set up, how to get this enabled and harmonized, take Harmonize specific questions at that point, so that those who are Harmonize customers can really dig into the nitty gritty of how to get this all turned on in their courses. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. As soon as I manage to find the share button behind all these windows. All right. Okay, so let me talk about goals, and then I will dive into clicking some buttons from a student view to show you what the student view of coaching looks like. When we approached what can we do with AI from a coaching student's perspective, the guidelines were really, how can we do this in an ethical way? We want to cause the students to think more. We don't want to cause them to think less. We don't want to spoon feed them. Here's exactly what you need to change. Please go change it. We really are trying to create more time spent with material, more time spent looking at the instructor's rubric and trying to understand what the instructor was trying to accomplish, and then some time spent doing revisions to be able to guide themselves through it. So we're trying really hard to walk that line of, with AI, how do we get our students to stop and think? And give them enough information and enough guidance that they know where to target their thinking and know where they need to spend their time. But in the end, it's really that stop and think. Here's what the instructor asked for. Here's what you've done. You know, focus in a particular area to be able to deal with that. I'm going to demo this now. The prerequisite for this is that you have a well-crafted activity and you have a rubric set up for your students. This is what a rubric looks like inside of Harmonize, where we just show them the 4 criteria to start with. The students can access the full rubric. What our goal is here is that when the student is drafting a post or drafting a submission to assignment, or we'll get into some of the ideas of how to use this in a bit, have they read this? Have they actually self-analyzed and been like, have I covered all of these things? Can we give them, by one button click, a pointer back to the rubric to say, you know what? Your work's doing pretty well, but you don't demonstrate a deep understanding of the cause of the Civil War and the relevance today, and you don't provide clear and accurate, insightful knowledge, those types of things. So in a perfect world, the student would come through, they would read this, they would do the work, they would stare at their own work, they would go back and read the rubric, they would self-assess, and they'd move on. Students don't necessarily have those skills, or they just don't take the time to do those skills. So let me show you what it now looks like for a student with coaching turned on. I'm in as a test student. I'm inside of Canvas. This works inside of the other LMSs as well. But when I click on Create New Post, I'm going to, as a test student, write my Civil War post. This is the subject of my post. And I'm going to go grab what is an okay response to this topic here. And oops, no, that is actually a really good response. Let me go grab one that is not so really good. Go. Copy and paste some stuff from a different doc. Put it in here. So I've basically done what the instructor asked for, at least in the initial. This is the discussion forum. I haven't moved into engaging with my peers and such yet, but I've answered the basic questions. In Harmonize, if you turn this on, there's a new button right above the publish that allows the student to optionally ask for AI feedback. When the student clicks this, we are taking their work, we are taking the assignment, we are taking the rubric, and we are trying to determine if the student wants to improve, which area should they focus on? Which part of the rubric are they currently doing the least well at? And then we will point them back at that rubric criteria, tell them what the rubric said, and tell them how much room they have for improvement. So you can see here, if I expand this out, my content understanding has some room for improvement. My creativity and originality has much room for improvement, so it's not quite as strong. And my mechanics and my grammar have some room for improvement. The area we chose to expand that was needing the most focus was engaging with my peers, because I haven't done any of that yet. But the student can come here and choose. They can be like, okay, I do want to get better at my initial post draft. I've read what they've asked for here. I've gone back and looked at my assignment, and then I can do some revisions. So let me go grab what would be an exceptional, over the top, really good version of this. And so I can say, okay, I've done some revisions and I've put a whole bunch more information in there, and then I can rescan my work. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to take their previous work, what we said about it, take the new revision work and all the other information, and tell the student, how are you doing now? As well as, are you getting better? So it could be you've jumped an entire category from some improvement possible to little improvement possible, which is what happened here. Like, my content understanding was crushing it. There's very little room for improvement. It got way better. The creativity and originality, I did something there that triggered the coach to be like, you are pushing into the bounds enough that I no longer can offer you feedback on it, so I'm not going to try. So I'm going to say, you know what, a human is needed assessment now. Like, you went deep enough into creativity that AI is not good at it. So you need to have these guardrails in place to say, like, okay, let's not let it lead the student astray. My mechanics and clarity got a lot better, little room for improvement there as well, but now it's still pointing me back at this critical engagement of like, I am not engaging with my peers at all. So as a student, I could then roll into focusing on this area, the rubric. I could publish my post, go find a peer's post, comment on it, and do the exact same process when I'm commenting. So if we asked for something, let me see what I asked for in critical engagement here. Thoughtful responses to post new insights, answering questions, sharing additional examples, etc. When I then go into the commenting period, if I typed in, I agree with Bob, and I scan my work, it's going to be like, much room for improvement there, and then continue to drive them through that self-assessment process. So when we say AI coaching and Harmonize, this is where we landed. This is the idea of like we want them to read the rubric. We want them to be able to have pointers back to the rubric so they can self-assess and improve. And we want to give them guidance along the way of as they're rescanning, are they getting better? Like even if they didn't jump from, 1 bar full to 2 bars full, we'll still give them a trend line so that they don't get despondent if they're not managing to get things better as they're going through. We don't funnel this into grading. We will show this to the instructor in grading, but we don't try to automatically grade. And you should be wary of trying to auto grade things because when we research this, it's actually not good enough to do auto grading. So be careful if you start to drift into actually assigning grades or anything along these lines. You could do the same thing in ChatGPT that we just did here. You could give the students, ask the students to say, hey, look, I'm going to give you a rubric. I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to write a draft. I want you to then ask ChatGPT to analyze it against the rubric and give you some feedback. I want you to include what you did, what ChatGPT gave you, and what revision you made. So if you're doing this outside of Harmonize, you want to see all three. We show this stuff to the instructor so we can see those drafts, et cetera. But if you're doing it outside of Harmonize, you really want those three things because you don't want the student to just give it all to ChatGPT and write it. You really want to see their work, what the feedback was given to them, and then move on. One of the negatives of doing this in ChatGPT is it will actually spoon feed them exactly what they should do. So you do have to be very careful with coaching your students on like, what is ethical use of AI? Like, how do you use it? Because it's important that you think about these things for this class. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is why, and go from there. So I'm going to step out of demo mode now, and I'm going to have Alex talk through some of the different use cases she's researched on this, as well as some of the research as to why this type of thing is important. And then we will come back into Harmonize towards the end and walk through what the setup, like what some of the caveats are when we're going through this. So I will stop sharing. And then Alex, without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah. So there are some applications for this that you could consider in your classes. The most obvious one would be just better discussions and deeper engagement and more following of the rubric in discussions. So you can turn this on for any of your discussions in Harmonize. And I definitely recommend talking to them about the fact that you're turning it on and why you're turning it on and what it's for. And then students will probably be more likely to use it and get something out of it, knowing that you fully approve of it and want them to be using this. Because a lot of our students have been told that AI use is bad or plagiarism. So letting them know, like, this is AI I turned on for you. So that you can really self-evaluate. It's not going to do the work for you. Marcus pointed that out. This isn't like, the ChatGPT, putting your answer into ChatGPT and asking it to fix it for you. But this is something that will really let the students self-assess and self-reflect and ultimately revise their own work. You could
If I
also,
could,
oh, go
let me
right
jump in
ahead.
on something you triggered that I had meant to bring up. The super important that you review your rubric when you're doing this. So that it triggered a couple things in me that so I've been talking with a bunch of instructors who are using this and what is their experience. One of the instructors was seeing great results and she told her students, the students who are using this are doing better work. And then because of that stamp of approval, other students were then like, oh, I should go do this. So there is a little bit of, I will say, cheerleading that may be needed. So if you use it and you're starting to see good results, asking your students, letting your students know that does actually increase adoption. The same instructor, however, was in a hurry when she was rolling into her class and she's like, it is coaching the students and it is telling them they're not doing great on the peer connectivity side of things, like across the board. And I'm like, well, let's take a look at your rubric. We took a look at the rubric and she's like, oh, that's my fault. Because the rubric we had built, because we build rubrics with AI, and I'll show you that in a bit, was targeting a college level and she was dealing with dual enrollment students. And so the peer engagement we were expecting from college students was not something that she was expecting from her high school students, but that's what the rubric said. So we are blindly going to follow your orders of what is in the rubric when we are coaching. And it's a good point, like if you're seeing sort of poor results when you're looking at them across the board, take a look at the rubric and say, is that actually what I want my students to do? Am I being too demanding for this particular set of students? Better to think about that up front, but it's always a good feedback mechanism if they're using it and struggling. You'll be able to see that. So I had meant to cover those 2 points. So sorry to interrupt, Alex. Back to you.
No, I really appreciate that interruption. It reminds me that I think it's easy to look at something like this and just equate it with more familiar models of automatic writing evaluation, like Grammarly and things like that, which are maybe looking at in general, is it good writing or not? And this is not that, because this is very much focused on, is this writing that matches what the rubric is asking for? So what this really is it's much closer to self-assessment through rubrics and helping the students do that self-assessment through the rubric. But if the rubric doesn't match what you want it to, you're going to run into problems. So I think that's a really great point. But because it's so focused on the rubric, I think it enables much richer and better revision ultimately to occur. So you could consider doing this not just for discussions, but for essay drafts. Have your students post their essay drafts. That could be an open discussion where everyone can see everyone's drafts, or you could set it private and they could just be looking at their own drafts, and then ask them to run the AI coach and reflect. And you can make sure that rubric is set up to match what you want to for your essay. And your students will actually be able to get essentially real-time writing feedback, like how am I doing against that rubric, and get that support for improving their drafts. It's pretty exciting. And then, the other key piece here, I think, is really to encourage that self-evaluation. So it may not just be, especially if it's something bigger, like an essay, it may not just be run the AI coach and improve. It may be like reflect on what the AI coach said and whether you agree with it or not, and what parts of the feedback you want to take. So in the research, we see that the process for self-assessment with a rubric has specific steps, like set clear expectations. That's having the rubric aligned to what you want it to be. But then the students actually need to conduct that self-assessment, and the AI is really just one component of that. And then you get to revising. And I really like the way the tool sort of rewards them. It can give them that instant score of like, did you do better? That kind of real-time feedback, I think, is very motivating for students.
Going to get a bit meta here for a second as well. If you explicitly so let's say you build a prompt with Harmonize and you ask them explicitly, I want you to do a draft. I want you to use the AI coach. I want you to do some revision. I want that revision to be as a second post so I can see them both side by side. If you ask for that in your instructions and then we build a rubric, the rubric is going to actually contain that. And so then they will be coached on, have they actually done what you asked them to do? So it can almost be a coach on process as well as content. So you can say, here's 2 or 3 rubric criteria that are covering the content of the draft, but I also have a rubric criteria that we would find in your instructions or you would build yourself that says, and I want you to submit a second revision focusing on the feedback you received. And I want you to actually write how that revision process went and what you learned and what you decided to improve from it. And we will coach them on that as well. Like, hey, did you do XYZ? We are not coaching on correctness. And I think this is an important aspect. I don't know, Alex, do you want to cover this or do you want me to cover this?
You can cover this. You
Okay.
know the AI better, but yes,
Okay.
the AI is not going to tell them whether they got their facts right.
Right. So let's say you're in a chemistry class and you're like, write an essay talking about carbon and oxygen and hydrogen bonds and how they work and everything. We will be able to coach on the fact that they did write about that topic. If part of your rubric says, were all of your facts correct? And did the covalent bonds get represented and how they worked correctly? We are going to label that as human assessment needed, because I don't know how familiar you are with the AI models out there, but I like to compare them to the drunk dude at a cocktail party who really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But if you're the professor and you're listening to him, you're like, man, that guy doesn't actually know what he's talking about. So if you delve too hard into fact-based stuff, we are going to not coach on that particular part of the rubric as well, because AI will think it knows facts and will make up things about facts, but actually doesn't know if it's correct or not. So can't actually analyze, like, was that covalent bond in chemistry represented correctly? Those types of things. So, all right, back to you,
And
Alex.
it's nice that the tool can kind of sense its own limitations, because if you go into Chat GPT, that guardrail isn't there, and the students don't know that it's the drunk guy at the bar who sounds smart but is actually not. And so it's really great that the tool kind of turns itself off and will mark things as human assessment needed. But even with these caveats, I think there's a lot of really cool potential here. One of the things we were talking about was how much research shows that first generation college students are less likely to express a need for help, to be proactive in seeking out help. And I'm really curious to see, as students are exploring this and using this tool, if maybe we see better results for students who find this less threatening than going to their professor or making an appointment at the writing center, if it kind of gives them that little boost to just be able to run the AI coach, run it as many times as they want, and get feedback as they're revising. I'm excited for the potential of this.
And so another, were you going to talk about peer review, or I can't remember if that was on your.
I touched on the drafts, but yeah, this is something I think that's potentially really powerful for peer review, both because you could imagine having the peer review assignment, setting up your discussion to essentially be a peer review assignment, asking the students to evaluate each other so that they're still getting human evaluation on their work, but then they can also run the AI coach on their own draft, and they have then another data point between their peers, and can use that to sort of triangulate and maybe make better decisions about their writing. Was there something you wanted to say in particular about peer review?
But we've been digging into peer review a lot because we're going to actually we're suspecting we're going to build it into Harmonize next spring. So you actually be able to do more formal peer reviews. But in doing so, one of the struggles is that students don't know how to do a peer review. They don't know what makes a good peer review. And so if you actually describe what a good peer review is and what you're looking for, that also gets put in the instructions, that also gets included in the rubric, and then students can get coached on the 2 rubric criteria that are about their first draft, and they can get coached on whatever you were actually asking for, constructive feedback, positive tone, those types of things. We can coach on that. And so if you have in your head the ideal behavior of your students, describe it, include it in a rubric, and then use the coach to guide that. So you're doing less of the classroom management side of thing. You're be able to be that sort of human that steps in and then interacts with them, because they are, hopefully, those that choose to use it, it is optional. They are doing more thorough work so that you're then interacting with a more complete product that then lets you really get into what do they truly understand and don't, and where do they need my help. So you're not always correcting the commas and the periods and whatnot in their work. All right. Did you have anything else to cover, Alex, or should we roll into quick
Let's roll
questions
into a demo or
demo and questions?
questions. What do you
So
think?
let's do this. I'm going to go back into Harmonize after this, and I'm going to show you how to set this up, because there's some steps of what it looks like, and we'll get into some of the things it's doing. Before I do that, though, I want to pause for questions on this whole process. Like what questions you have about AI, what's it capable of, what questions you have about this particular thing. Is there anything you would like us to go back to and cover before we dive into the nuts and bolts of how to get this working inside of Harmonize? I will start the screen share and head in that direction while we're waiting for any questions to come in chat, or you can raise your hand as well. So, share my screen.
I'll try and keep an eye on the chat too here.
Okay, cool. Let me leave the student view. I'm going to come back in as an instructor. I should have had an empty assignment set up for this, but I will go through the full process for creating a Harmonized assignment. Wonder what we should coach on. Alex, you have any topics that you like? Robert Frost poetry analysis.
I was gonna say, you know, my go-to. I'm always like, analyze the tone in this Robert Frost poem.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go into publish this. I don't forget. I'm gonna go ahead and set this up, and then we're gonna talk through the steps needed to actually build this. So plumbing, this is Canvas specific, so I'm sorry, I should have set this up beforehand, but I need a 10-point assignment hooked up to Harmonize. Next time I will be better and actually prep my demo accordingly. One thing I will say, actually, maybe it's good that I did this on purpose, because if you are unfamiliar with Harmonize's private mode, that is actually a division of the discussion tool. We will be making that a top level thing. So if you're like, man, I would love to use this coach for an essay assignment that I'm doing and there is no peer connectivity, still create that as a discussion, because there's a mode of Harmonize that lets you say this is a private discussion between me and individual students, i.e. an assignment. So you can still use this in private assignments, but you're starting by selecting discussion. That has confused some instructors, so I cover it there, and we will fix that confusion soon. Okay, and save this. See a question from Kim. These can still be graded in the gradebook, but not auto-graded. Why we will see these in grading area and feedback in the LMS, or should it be graded directly in the LMS? So Kim, if I remember right, you're Moodle, right? So you can, let me take a step back. For those that aren't familiar with auto grading, we auto grade based on participation. Did you do one post? Did you do 2 comments? Did they have a certain number of words? If so, you earn points. You can still do that. And what we're actually going to be simplifying the process of is setting it up by default to do that, because for 80% of your students, if they did the post and they used the coach and they made the comments, they got 100%, it's a formative assignment. Let's not waste the instructor's time entering in 100% for 80% of the students. However, because we are going to generate a rubric to do this, you will then be able to, if you want, go correct any score that was received by the student. Say they got 100%, but then you went and looked at the feedback results. They used the coach, but they didn't really crush it on a quality perspective. Just use the rubric to click to grade. Inside of Moodle, inside of Harmonize, Kim, inside of Moodle for you, or inside of SpeedGrader for Canvas, use the rubric to click to grade, and take away points using the rubric, because that is fantastic substantive feedback to the student. Like, yes, you lost points on this rubric criteria and this one. You only need to do that for the students who don't gain full points, so that they are the ones that you're spending your time critiquing using the rubric that we generate to do the coaching. But then the students can pursue that quality grade more because they can use the rubric coach to drive it as far along as they want, or as they have the energy for when they're going into this. So let me set up this Robert Frost thing. So this is a Robert Frost, let's see, poetry, not pottery, poetry analysis, and looking for the tone and metaphors in the poetry. What else do you look for in your assignment? We're looking for a peer review of each other's analysis of the poem. What else do you do in your Robert Frost stuff?
I think that's good. Do you want to, should we try to get it to coach on, is the peer review like helpful, or is
Yeah.
it kind? Is
Looking
the peer
for,
review positive? Does it make suggestions? I don't know. We probably won't get that deep in it because we're not going to put replies on the post, but
yeah, okay, but fair enough. But doing that will let us then build an assignment that sets up that way. So you
yeah.
don't, I am building this with our AI for building the actual assignment just for expedience. If you have a post that you, a topic, a discussion that you already have built, you don't have to rebuild it with our rubric. You can do this all manually if you want. I'm doing this just for expedience. So now I have a analysis section and discuss the insights gain, and then a summary post, and then we're looking for some of that that peer review for what we're doing. When you are in Harmonize, you cannot, so for in Canvas, you can attach a Canvas rubric straight to a Harmonize assignment. In all other LMSs, you have to use our own rubric generator. Even in Canvas, though, you have to generate the rubric with our AI, because what we need is a very specific rubric to be able to coach successfully. What we see with most rubrics that are attached from Canvas is that they're a reused rubric that is kind of generic. It's like, this is what a good discussion is, but it doesn't talk about, in this case, Robert Frost poetry. It doesn't talk about what I was actually asking about. And so we need this level of detail to be able to coach specific to your assignment. So we just had to say we can't coach on Canvas assigned rubrics. You have to build one with our AI generator, because what we're going to do is walk you through those criteria. Super important that you read these closely, because this is where the instructor I was talking about made a misstep, where for the collaboration side, it was too complicated for what she wanted her students to do, or what her expectations were. So make sure that this is essentially the left side of the rubric. Make sure this is exactly what you're looking for your students. Add anything that's missing, or delete anything you disagree with, so that when you then go to generate the full rubric, we will actually have very specific descriptions that match what you are actually after too, because that's what drives this coach. And the same thing if you're doing this in ChatGPT, you need this level of detail in your rubric in order for ChatGPT able to actually to do the work. And then we save this here, and now we have the rubric built. The only thing you need to do in Harmonize to turn on this coaching is this switch right here. So this is the only additional step. All of this was just scaffolding of like, I need a good assignment, I need a good rubric, and then I'm going to turn on coaching, and then I can publish this. So now I have my assignment with the rubric built, with coaching enabled for my students. In Canvas, we are putting this rubric back into Canvas. So it's now a full-blown Canvas rubric. You can link it up to outcomes and such. You can grade with it in SpeedGrader, those types of things. And all the other LMSs, We are letting you use this in our grading process, but it does not get put back into the LMS. They don't have a way for us to put the rubrics back into the LMSs and on Canvases. But it's ready for the students to go here. So I've already demoed what the student view would be. I would go answer this, I would make some comments, I would scan. But what I wanted to show you is what you, the instructors, will see before we wrap up. So let me come into find one that actually has some student work in it already, so I can show you what this looks like. Launch this in SpeedGrader since I'm in Canvas. This is the same thing you would see in not in SpeedGrader, but in the gradebook for Moodle, Blackboard, D2L, etc. If you had coaching enabled, there is a new button here that says View AI Feedback Results. And you will be able to click on this and get a feel for this particular student. They scanned 13 times. I have yet to see a student who scanned 13 times. I've seen 9, 10, and 11 scans. I haven't seen 13, but it's a demo environment. We will show you what we told the student, and we will let you go back in time to see what it was that the student saw. So you can tell what we were actually showing the student, so you can see what we told them. In this case, I'm changing things. I'm getting better and worse because I'm just playing with it. So I'm telling me I made it worse, I made it better, I made it worse, I made it better. But you'll be able to see kind of what the student journey was. The reason we put this behind a button here is that we really don't want to bias you in your grading process. Like if you used auto grading, it'll fill in. You can use the rubric to actually grade by click the grading in all of the LMSs. We would like you to be able to come through and do your own your own assessment of the student work, because this may disagree with you as you're going in. Like the AI is not as good at you as being a teacher. It's not as dead on of like, you know, the student, you know what they're struggling with, you know how they're working on it, you know, what kind of feedback do you give them? So it's there if you need to see it. Otherwise, just continue with your standard process, assessing what the student has done, grading them with a rubric or auto grading them or combining the two if you would like. We're about 2 minutes over, but that's the end of the walkthrough of it. So we can take questions on the nuts and bolts of this. I would like to run through a little caveat of like if you're doing video usage and such, how it's going to behave there. But get your questions in, and I'll answer those, and then we will send you on your way. We'll also have a recording of this available. On the topic of video or imagery or attached Word docs and things like that, currently we only coach on text that you've put into Harmonize directly into the text area. If you recorded a video, we will label, if your rubric says record a video, we will label that particular rubric criteria human needed. So for like a foreign language class, if it was practice your pronunciation. ChatGPT and the AI models can't yet tell, is the pronunciation good? And so we will just say, we're not going to coach on that. We'll coach on the other things. A lot of what we're seeing instructors do is combining the two things. They're asking students to do written work and support it with a video reflection, and support it with some sort of artifact or attachment, because then we are getting the students to think in two ways. We're getting them to do initial data work. We can coach on that and make them get better, but then they can also do a reflection, therefore proving that at least they've thought about it. It is authentically their work because they've stepped out of what AI can do easily. You know, AI can write text really easily, but if they have to record a video and talk through what they learned, AI can't yet do that very easily, at least not freely. So that's what we are encouraging people to do. But just keep that in mind. Like if you're in an art class and you are entirely focused on photography and composition, AI coach is not for you unless you are having your students write about the history of a piece of art or something like that. So keep that in mind in terms of limitation. Obviously, when the models get better about doing image and video analysis and such, we can jump in on that and see what we can do. Any parting questions for us? No? Take one, take two. Awesome. So we'll get this recording up probably in the day or two. David will send it along for those so you get notified when it's up, so you don't have to keep checking if you want to share it with other people. We have a whole bunch of other webinars coming up as well. Let me go to the events section of our website just to highlight what that looks like. I will put that out into the chat here so you have it. This is the one we're covering today. We have a whole bunch of them coming up. You know, how to use video to combat AI, a private mode of this, really delving a little more into the private assignment side of things, which will be similar to this one with the AI coaching, but delving more into some use cases for private assignments, student facilitation, all these things. And I will say also, we just sent an email out, OLC, we're actually going to get with a couple instructors who have used this during the semester and talk about their experiences with it. That's going to be hosted via OLC. And I'll have David include that link because I don't have it handy for you to sign up. But the end result is we're actually seeing this do what we're talking about it doing, which is so freaking awesome. We are seeing students that are trying 4, 5, 6 times, and we are seeing them improve their work and doing that sort of productive struggle. And we are seeing as the semester progressive, more students try to use it more, which means they are finding value in it. So lots of fun there. We're going to be digging into those results and sharing them. If you want to hear from instructors, we'll do that, host that with OLC, and we'll also share that recording out as well. I don't know if anyone here wasn't a Harmonize customer, but if you're not, we do offer free pilots. Put my sales hat on. I don't have a sales hat. That's the end of my sales spiel there. We do free pilots. You can go to the website and check it out if you want. But I hope you learned something, even if you don't become a Harmonize customer, just in terms of what AI can do, kind of how you walk that ethical line of what's good for students and how to get that to happen. So, awesome. All right, everybody, have a good day, and hope we see you in one of these. We have coming up every week. We have something we're covering, and hopefully 30 minutes, although we went 36 minutes this time, but in short little sessions. Thanks, everybody.